The Treaty of Lausanne, the curse of the West and the end of the sick man of Europe. On July 24, 1923, a century ago, this treaty was signed. Some consider it a peace treaty, while others view it as a humiliating one, in which the Ottoman Empire relinquished its possessions, lands, and leadership of the Islamic world and Muslims in exchange for a small piece of land, after having been the Great Caliphate for more than 6 centuries. The negotiations faltered several times, and on February 4, 1923, the Turkish delegation, headed by Chief of the Turkish General Staff İsmet İnönü, refused to sign. Lord Curzon, head of the British delegation, left Lausanne, and the negotiations appeared to have collapsed. The Treaty of Lausanne was finally concluded on July 24, 1923, as a peace treaty, thereby abrogating the Treaty of Sèvres of 1920, which the Ottoman Empire had been forced to sign as one of the defeated powers in World War I. The Treaty of Lausanne established a final settlement regarding the status of Anatolia and Eastern Thrace, the European part of present-day Turkey, within the Ottoman Empire. This settlement was a result of the Turkish War of Independence between the Allied powers of World War I and the Grand National Assembly of Turkey, which was dominated by the Turkish nationalist movement led by Mustafa Kemal. The treaty resulted in international recognition of the Republic of Turkey, which was established on the territories of the Ottoman Empire in Anatolia and Eastern Thrace. The Treaty of Sèvres, signed on August 10, 1920, was unjust to the Turkish people, especially to the Ottoman state, as it carved out vast areas inhabited by Turks from Turkey and recognized the occupation of other regions in Anatolia seized at the end of World War I. Present-day Turkey was divided into 4 occupation zones controlled by the armies of 4 nations: Britain in Istanbul and the Straits, Greece in Izmir and its surroundings, Italy on the southern coast and southwestern Anatolia, and France in Cilicia in southeastern Anatolia. The treaty also established a new state, Armenia, in eastern Anatolia, which had not previously existed. This included the cities of Kars and Erzurum in central Anatolia and Trabzon on the Black Sea coast. It also established an autonomous region, Kurdistan, in southeastern Anatolia. The treaty obligated the Ottoman Empire to maintain a small navy and army without heavy weapons, aircraft, or warships, and placed its budget under the supervision of a financial body comprised of the Allies. To guarantee repayment of its public debt, the treaty retained the central and northern regions of the Anatolian Plateau as part of the Turkish state. Istanbul was under British occupation when Sultan Mehmed VI was forced to sign the Treaty of Sèvres under British pressure. Mustafa Kemal rejected the treaty and, with the forces at his disposal, gathered representatives from the provinces who were his supporters. These representatives convened in Ankara as the Supreme National Assembly and voted to reject the treaty. Thus, 2 rival authorities were formed, vying for sovereignty, one under the Sultan in Istanbul and the other in Ankara, which defeated the Caliph's army sent to quell the rebellion. Mustafa Kemal resumed the war against the Allies in what he called the War of Independence. He triumphed over the Greeks in a war that culminated in the Battle of Sakarya, driving them out of Anatolia. He also defeated the Italians and the French, who signed the Treaty of Ankara with him in 1921, ceding Cilicia to him. On November 1st, Mustafa Kemal abolished the Sultanate following a vote of the Grand National Assembly. He appointed his heir, Abdülmecid II, as Caliph, a purely religious position without any governmental or executive powers. 3 days after the caliph's appointment, the Lausanne Conference opened. It is widely believed that this was a precondition set by the British for initiating negotiations on a new treaty concerning the future of Turkey. The treaty stipulated Turkey's independence and defined its borders, as well as providing protection for the Greek Orthodox Christian minority in Turkey and the Muslim minority in Greece. However, most of the Christian population of Turkey and the Muslim population of Greece at that time had been displaced according to the preceding agreement for the exchange of Greek and Turkish populations, namely the 1923 Greek-Turkish Population Exchange Agreement. The inhabitants of Istanbul and the islands of Imbros and Tenedos, numbering approximately 270,000 at that time, and the Muslim population residing in western Thrace, that is, west of the European part of present-day Turkey, 120,000 at that time. On February 4, 1923, while the Lausanne Conference was still in session, and due to the intransigence of both sides, each claiming the Mosul region, they agreed to postpone the dispute and remove it from the agenda because of the extremely sharp stalemate. Since the war, the British had sought to contain the Bolshevik threat by expanding their presence in the Near East, in Iraq and around Iran and Turkey. Meanwhile, Turkey insisted on the region based on the ethnic unity between Turks and Kurds, the fact that most of the region's trade was with Anatolia, the illegitimacy of the Allied occupation, and the right to self-determination for the region, whose inhabitants already wanted to be part of Turkey. Lord Curzon refuted the Turkish claims that the majority of the population were Arabs, who are of Semitic origin, and Kurds, who are of Aryan origin and fundamentally different in origin from the Turks, and most of Mosul's trade was with Iraq and not with Anatolia. The British government had been officially mandated to administer Iraq by the League of Nations, and the Kurdish revolts in the 19th century and before the war showed that the Kurds did not support being part of Turkey. Britain ultimately referred the dispute to the League of Nations, which ruled that no party had the right to occupy or control the region. This effectively nullified the Turkish claims, as the British presence was a legitimate mandate under the auspices of the League of Nations. It is worth noting the growing strategic importance of the Mosul region because of the rapidly increasing importance of oil after the war. The Mosul oil was extracted by the British-owned Iraq Petroleum Company, a fact that significantly influenced the positions of both sides. The Straits question also underscored the Allies' paranoia regarding the Bolshevik breakthrough. The victorious powers imposed the Treaty of Sèvres on Turkey, which placed control of the Straits under the authority of the Straits Committee. This committee was composed of representatives of the great powers Greece, Romania, Bulgaria, and Turkey. At Lausanne, the conference sessions dedicated to the Straits became a duel between the two delegates, Curzon of Britain and Chicherin of Russia. The Russians demanded the passage of warships at all times and the restoration of full Turkish sovereignty over the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits, with Turkey's unrestricted right to fortify its shores. But ultimately, the British prevailed. Article 1 of the Straits Convention, dated July 24, 1923, stipulated freedom of passage and navigation through the Straits in both peace and war. Article 4 stipulated that the shores of the Bosporus and Dardanelles Straits, as well as the adjacent islands in the Aegean and Marmara Seas, would be demilitarized. The consequences of the treaty. Robert Gurwith stated that the conference and the resulting treaty provided international recognition to the Greek-Turkish agreement on the resettlement of populations on religious grounds. This had serious and far-reaching implications, far exceeding those of Greece and Turkey alone.
The Turkish-Greek agreement, signed on January 30, 1923 in Lausanne for the exchange and resettlement of populations, affected all subjects belonging to a different religion, even those who spoke the language of the host country as their mother tongue, such as the Muslims of Crete. The Treaty of Lausanne effectively established a precedent in international law, granting governments the right to expel large numbers of their citizens on the grounds that they belonged to the other. Indeed, for centuries, most people, despite their conflict, who were subjects of the former European empires, lived, interacted, and were treated with considerable fairness. Furthermore, the Treaty of Lausanne represents a reversal of the Treaty of Sèvres provisions on an independent Armenian state and autonomous Kurdish region in eastern Anatolia. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and activate the bell icon to receive all new updates.